All right. I believe we are live. um, all right, I have audio. Okay. Good morning. Um, okay, this is annoying. All right. So, have you ever felt like motherhood was a thankless job? Even when they're really little? Or have you just ever wished your kids said please and thank you? And it didn't feel like you were pulling teeth to get them to say it and you just can't figure out how to get them to say it. On this episode, I am going to share my journey and my experience with teaching my kids manners and how I'm told thank you on a regular basis. Uh, and kind of give you the three ways I've been able to successfully teach my toddlers, manners. Hello and welcome. I'm Haley Ram. This is the Mama with Trauma podcast. I think I'm still waking up. Um, and if you're new, I'm a mom to five lovely children. I'm a wife, and for almost 9 years now. Um, and I love being a mom. I love being a mom. I love sharing my experience about being a mom. I think even though technically I'm still a young mom, and my children, my oldest is almost 8. Um, Once you've had a couple in a row and something has repeatedly been a success, I think it's safe to say that I have some authority on speaking on that. Um, Now, years down the road, I may come back and be like, you know what, I was totally wrong. But I have that option. So, um, kind of how, so in the beginning, with my understanding of how you teach children how to do things, is you force them, right? So for example, the way that I taught manners to my two first, um, was in order to get them to say please, I would withhold the bite that they were gonna get. Like they had to ask, like say please, and like until they said please, I wouldn't give it to them. And that until they would be like, "You're crazy, mom. I'm still just one. Leave me alone. And let me eat my food." And it resulted in a lot of tears. That was what was modeled to me growing up. So I thought, I was still in the early stages. I was still, I guess, deprogramming the faulty uh, systems, I guess, in teaching my children. Um, so that wasn't really successful. And after a while, I was like, you know what? They're they're little. They'll learn how to say please and thank you. There's a cat outside my window. No. Sounds like a baby sometimes. But something that changed, and just as they got a little bit older, we noticed they kind of just automatically said some things. And we're like, okay, how'd that happen? So I realized in breaking this down, we follow a lot of our parenting strategies can just be summed up in one principle, and that is the golden rule. The golden rule that says, you know, do to others as you would have them do to you. Now you can find this. This is actually scripture. It's comes from Luke 6:31, and I think it's also in Matthew. Um, and it's seriously true, especially in parenting. Like if you want your kids to have manners, um, model them to them. Be the kind of person that says thank you, that says please, that says excuse me, um, that doesn't have burp or pass gas in front of your kids. Now, at a certain age, that is still like, we're still working on that with our kids. Like, my kids are not, like, prim and proper, let's all, take them to a extremely fancy restaurant, and they're gonna just, wow everyone. There's still works in progress in some things, obviously, but, um, modeling the manners to them, that is, number 1, the number 1 way that we have taught our kids, manners and how to get them to say please and thank you. And um, my 2 middle children, when were toddlers, they were saying thank you and please by the time they were, like, 15 months old, and that's not an exaggeration. It's not. Um, and it wasn't like I was trying to get that to happen, it just started happening. And then when we started to really analyze exactly how that was happening, it was, "Oh, I think it's because we model it to them." And there's 3 different ways that we've modeled this to them. So, one is it's how my husband Reagan and I communicate to one another. We don't demand, we don't command things from one another. We'll say, "Hey, could you please hand that to me?" or "Thank you so much for getting that to me." That's how my husband and I talk to one another. Or, "Excuse me, I need to get through here." Right? We're actually pretty polite to one another, and our children see that. They see that, "Oh, mom and dad treat each other this way. I guess this is how we should treat one another." Um, and that's most of what your kids are gonna learn from you anyway, is how you treat your spouse, is how you treat one another, and it's how you treat them. Um, and then this one thing that Reagan has done, I can't take credit for this one, because he specifically made a point. I don't even remember when he started doing this. I think this was a couple years ago. He would say at the dinner table, "Thank you, mommy, for this delicious dinner." So, pass this along to your husband, present this idea to him, and he would say it, and then the kids would start to say it. And now they just automatically say it if they genuinely like the meal. I'm gonna do a whole other podcast on, um, honest feedback from your kids, because I think it's important to dedicate a whole thing to them there. Um, and I think it's important to get your kids' opinions on the things that you're doing for them, and making if they're eating something, you should know what they think about it, okay? Um Anyway, so they will now say, "Thank you for this delicious dinner, mommy." And my toddler will say that. Of course, he's still working out the difference between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So if breakfast, lunch, and dinner all taste delicious to him, he will say, "Thank you for this delicious dinner, mommy," at every meal. I know what he means. Um, but that's something my husband has done, and I didn't ask him to do it. He just automatically started doing it. He's a genius in that way, and he's an amazing human being. And so that, sometimes it can be exhausting to not sometimes, it's exhausting a lot of the times to be, to be the one in charge of all the meals sometimes. And when you sit down and then you get that, you're met with the "Thank you for this delicious dinner, mommy." It's like, "Oh, okay, thanks." That kind of means a lot. Um, so the third way we model the manners to them is this is how we speak to our children. Now, not 100% of the time, we're not perfect. I am by no means perfect. Every now and then, I still have to catch myself and use please and thank you with my kids. I say thank you a lot, but, like, asking them to do something is I'm still working on, like, "Hey, could you please do this?" And yes, I understand that children should obey us and follow commands. However, it it hits their ears a little bit more easily if there's a please attached to it. And now when they ask me, literally last night, my 2-year-old, I reference the 2-year-old because it blows my mind. My older children do this too, but it blows my mind that the 2-year-old can now say these things. he walks up to me, hands me his little cup, and he says, "Please, mommy, can you get me some water?" And it was in a pleasant tone, and I was like, "Yes, of course." And I handed it back to him. I said, "Thank you." And he goes, or I said, "Here you go." And he goes, "Thank you, mommy." And I said, "You're welcome." And it was just, it's so hilarious, and it's adorable, and it's very pleasant. It's very pleasant to be around children who exhibit gratefulness for the things that you give them. Um, I'll give them fresh clothes, and my daughters will say, "Thank you, mommy." My one daughter, she has this phrase where she, "Thank you for my fresh underwear, mommy." And it's just, they all say thank you for the different things that I do for them. And, like, even when I've cleaned up a certain area, I'll be like, "Thank you, mommy, for cleaning the house," or "Thank you, mommy, for mopping the floor," or "Thank you, mommy, for doing the dishes." Like, there's literally, like, countless times in a day, I'll be told thank you for doing the things that I do, and part of it is because I do tell them thank you when they complete a task or when they listen. I say, "Thank you for listening to me," because that is important, and also when you say thank you to them, you let them know that you appreciate a certain behavior, they're more likely to repeat it. So, modeling manners is the number one way to get your child to say please and thank you. Say it to them. Um, and then I guess the second one kind of goes hand in hand with this. Um, which is when they don't say the correct term or the correct phrase, you give them the correct phrase. So, this is kind of how I combat whining. Um, when a child asks, "Mommy, I need water," I'd be like, "I understand that you need water. Could you ask that the correct way?" And with the older children, they know the correct way already. With a smaller kid like my toddler, I'll have to model it to them exactly how they're supposed to say it. And we'll say it in both my husband and I do this, we'll say it in that pleasant tone. And we'll say it, "Can you say, 'Mommy, can I have some water, please?'" And then, the wine will still be somewhat there. Sometimes it's because they're really tired, okay? You're gonna tell me you haven't whined as an adult? Like, I know we get on the kids about whining, but it's like, seriously, there's a lot of adults that whine too. So, um, yeah, giving them the correct phrase to say so that they know what's expected of them. Children thrive when they know where the line is, they know what's expected of them, they know how you want them to behave. If you don't know how you want them to behave, then how are they supposed to behave, right? You have to get clear on that. And when you get clear on that, then you can tell them, "Hey, here's how we want you to behave." And then when you help them, you work together, it happens a lot more easily and there's less frustration. Um, so yeah, giving them the correct phrase, whatever phrase that is. Okay, say thank you know, that kind of thing, or oh, you're welcome. Just repeating those. Um, and yeah, it's just, sometimes they have to repeat it like 2 or 3 times. And if they're starting to get frustrated, just be like, "That's okay. You're close enough." Right? Sometimes close enough, especially when they are exhausted, or that there's some underlying issue, or like the kid is like been upset recently, or they just had a meltdown. um they might not be able or capable to say exactly the way it's supposed to be said. So if after like the second or third phrase was just like, "Okay, that's close enough." um so not frustrating your kid. And then the third way that we've modeled this, or that we've gotten them to say this, I feel like I'm still asleep, um, is respect them. And I actually, in terms of when you want them to say "Yes, sir," and "Yes, ma'am." Now, this idea came from my best friend. I believe she was a social worker at one point. Um, And her children all not the youngest one, he was still, like, 2, um, but her 2 teens and her 7-year-old all told her, "Yes, ma'am," and referred to one another as, "Yes, sir." Um, and they referred to me as "Yes, ma'am." They said, "Yes, ma'am" to me, and called me miss. And so she had been over at my house, and I asked her one day, I was like, "How did you get that to happen? How did you get them to say, 'Yes, sir,' and 'Yes, ma'am'?" Now, I was taught to say, "Yes, sir," and "Yes, ma'am," but it was forced, obviously. Um, and it was more of, this is how you have to treat other people. So as children, we were commanded to give these titles to all the adults around us. So when she showed me, like, how she does it, it was like, "Oh, that makes total sense," but it also blew my mind at the same time. And she said, "Oh, I just tell them, 'Yes, sir.'" Now she didn't have any girls, so she never said, "Yes, ma'am." Um, but she said, "I just say, 'Sir, can you please,' like, 'No, sir, don't do that,'" or when they would ask a question, yes, sir." And, then she taught them to say "Yes, ma'am" to other adults by saying it herself. And she would say that to me. She's like, "Ma'am," or "Yes, ma'am." And it totally threw me off guard, but at the same time, I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." And she explained that it took her a couple of years, of repeating it to them for them to say it back to her. So it wasn't like she was expecting instant results. And if you were expecting instant results with parenting, that's just gonna leave you frustrated. Sometimes it does take years of saying the same thing over and over and over, especially in those early years. Especially in those early years. I'll explain that in a second. Um, but it makes complete sense that when we model respect to our children, they are going to model it back, right? And for some people, I don't know why this is controversial, but just respecting your children and treating them as human beings. No, we're not considering them adults, obviously, but one day they will be. And if you want them to relate to other adults, then they need to know how to do that. So we refer to our children as sir and ma'am. And sometimes I'll refer to Ember or my 2 daughters as Miss Ember or Miss Halo, or sometimes it just comes out as Princess Halo and Princess. Now that one they do say back. They're like, "Princess Mommy." um, so it's that one is taking longer, p also because I just started doing that about a year ago. It's been about a year since we've started doing that. Um, and it's also just kind of funny to some extent to tell your toddler, "Sir, please stop picking your nose." Um, it's just kind of funny. Uh, but it works, and I know it works because my friend's children were all like, she had such beautiful relationships. She still has beautiful relationships with her children, and that's why I asked her, because I was like, "You are doing a great job. What are you doing?" Um, so one of the things that's very important to understand with very small children is that repetition is the name of the game. That is how you get your kid to do anything. And when they're little, they're very tiny, they need to be told the same thing thousands of times. And if you say it often enough, you're a toddler. Like, if this is when you start, if you start when they're a baby and you start doing these things, I said please and thank you to my babies. Like, that's when I started speaking to them like this. It wasn't I waited until they were a certain age and then I said please and thank you. It was, I've always spoken to my babies this way after the first two. The first two were, I was still getting my act together. Um, but oh, maybe I did say please and thank you to them. I don't remember. Um, Children need repetition. Like, adults need repetition too. I feel like, we need to hear the same thing a million times sometimes in order for it to make sense. And it's like, if we're that way, why are we not considering that little children are this way? Especially when you understand that memory and a child is still developing. They forget easily. And then also, children, it's a child's nature to push the boundaries to understand where the line is. So if your child doesn't say it, sometimes they're going to wonder, they're thinking, well, what happens if I don't say it? And it's not something you need to punish. You don't like punishment should be the very like last tool. It's such a tiny part of the parenting toolbox. It really is. Because if you just come at it with with a heart of understanding and humility and respect toward your kid, then it's going to be so much easier. Things are going to flow so much better, and they're going to pick it up a lot more easily. Because if you're disrespected, how do you feel? How does that make you feel? Do you want to take advice from the person that just disrespected you? No. So why are we expecting it to be any different from children? I get that children are small and they have to learn how the world is. And no, not every person is going to be respectful to them in the real world. But you're not teaching them to always, why would you always teach them to operate in the real world? That's dumb. That's harmful to them. They are learning directly from you how people should behave, right? If all the parents in the world operated with the understanding that I'm teaching my kid how they should behave, society would be a lot better. It really would. It starts when they're young. Anyway, so if you're not getting the results immediately, if you start to implement this yourself, then give it some time. Just be patient. And that's the other thing is like when they're a little bit older, like in that like 5, maybe it starts more like when they're 4. Trying to think. My kids have always seemed a little bit more developmentally advanced. So, um around 4, 3, 4 is when they start picking up things a little bit faster, and you won't have to repeat it that many times. Well, like 2 and under or under 3 is when it takes that repetition over and over. Um, but just have some patience and you'll get there. So, to recap, if you want your kid to say please and thank you and to have the manners at the table. We're still working on the table manners. Um, I didn't even cover that. They yeah, where I'm teaching them to chew with their mouth closed, and my 5 and almost 8-year-old, they know to do it. In fact, that was something my daughter said to me last night. She's like, "Look, mommy, I chew like you do." And I was listening and I was like, "Ah, what she just said. I chew like you do. I chew with my mouth closed." Um, and that's the other thing. If you want your children to be adorable to other people, I know they're adorable to you, but if you want other people to find them charming and you want them to go far in life, teaching them manners, table manners, all kinds of manners is going to get them there. Because we like it when we're treated nicely by other people, right? Don't you just love it when you're told please and thank you, or when you're, at dinner with someone and they have manners? Um, Now, do our children, pass gas at the table? Yeah, we're still working on that one. Potty humor is very prominent in the house right now because that's the age that they're at. That's when their life revolves around trying to maintain their bathroom habits. That's what they find funny. Um, but there's also my one daughter who will, oh my gosh, she will burp the loudest burp that you would ever think that could come out of a 4-year-old. But She always says, "Excuse me." So, we're still working on the cover your mouth when you burp or try to burp quietly. That one's still a hard one to navigate even as an adult. So, it's their works in progress, but there's things that are happening, right? If there's a certain way you want your child to behave, model it to them. Be that person. As I was recapping, be that person. Be the person who says, "Excuse me, please, thank you. May I have this? Can I have this? Would you pass that to me, please?" Like, and if you want them to speak in a polite tone, you have to speak in a polite tone to them. That's a I'm gonna do a whole other podcast on that because I have noticed a difference in the tone that I use with my kids is often the tone that they will speak to me. Um, so just be the polite person. Be the polite person to your spouse. Treat them right. We're very polite to strangers, but it's hard for us to be polite to the people in our own home who have to see us every day, who have to put up with us every day. Wouldn't it be nicer for everybody if we were polite to all the people in our home? So model it to them, give them the correct phrase when they're still learning, um, and then just respect them. Children deserve respect as much as any human being. All human life, you know, deserves some respect to some degree. We're not going to argue that right now. Anyway, that is all I have for today. This was more on the shorter side. And I hope this was helpful. Drop in the comments what um, what you've gotten your toddler to say that you didn't expect them to say, because that's going to breed some funny stories. Um, and let me know if you try this and if you have success, or if you've done this yourself and what you found, what success you've had. I think we can all learn from each other. Um, and yeah, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Where did my mouse go? There it is.